All right, well, good morning. It is great to be with you this morning, and always a privilege to have a chance to share, hopefully, a good word with you. You know, I was sitting where you're sitting maybe 100 years ago. It feels like that now. It was a long, long time ago. I was an undergraduate in college. One of the requirements in those days for graduation from my university was this interdisciplinary team-taught course. We had four professors, not one, but four. We had an art professor. Sometimes it was a music professor, depending on the semester. We had a history professor. We had a theology professor. And we had a philosophy professor. And the four of them would tag team and take turns, and we had to pass this class to be able to graduate from school. It was a tough class. Everybody knew that it was a tough class. On the first day of class, our philosophy professor for this course walked into this large lecture hall. He looked at us and he said something like this: "Welcome. This course is about the search for truth. And before we begin, I want to ask you a question. I want to know how many of you are willing to truly be committed to pursuing the truth, no matter what it costs." And he waited, and most everybody in the lecture hall raised their hands high. It was early in the semester. We were still pretty enthusiastic about what was going on. We wanted a good grade, and so we had our hands up. The professor smiled, and he said, "Excellent, take out your syllabus." And he took out the syllabus. We took out our syllabuses, and he said, "I want to remind you that in this 18-page syllabus, you will find the truth for the course that you're about to take. It's going to be a class where you're going to be required to pass a final exam that's worth 50% of your grade for the course. And there's going to be group projects, and there's going to be essays, and there's going to be a 20-page final paper." And you know what happened? Slowly, hands around the room began to go down. Professor said to us, "What you're holding is the truth about this course, but notice how many of you liked the idea of truth right up until it involved reading and writing and studying and losing sleep." And then he added, "That's the thing about truth. We all say we want it until we find out what it demands of us." Well, this morning I want to continue a conversation that Blair started with you on Tuesday about this whole idea of truth. You see, right at the center of our university, right at the heart of the Christian faith, right at our true north is that word, truth. Not my truth, not your truth, not just opinions, not perspectives, but truth. What is real? What is trustworthy? What is ultimately worth staking your life on? I don't know if you've discovered this about your time at the university, but for me, I found out that college is a great time to ask some of those big rock questions of life. Who am I? What am I doing here? What am I going to do with my life? What am I supposed to do with my life? Is all of the stuff that they're telling me really true? Is Christianity true? What if nothing is really true? What if it's all just relative? Now, some of you get excited by those questions, and others feel anxious, even afraid, because, you know, when you start pulling on one thread, sometimes the whole sweater of certainty begins to unravel. And yet I think that's exactly where Christian universities should be. Right in the middle of the questioning, not running from it, not shutting it down, not silencing it, because if Christianity is true, and I believe with all my heart, it's the reason why I'm here today, I believe it, then it doesn't need protection from questions. Good, honest questions. In the Gospel of John, the 18th chapter, Jesus was on trial. He was standing before the Roman governor who was in charge of the country at that time. His name was Pontius Pilate. And Pilate asked Jesus, he says, "So you are a king?" And Jesus answered him, "For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. And I wish we could have been there to actually have seen maybe the body response, the physical actions to what Pilate says next, maybe even to have heard his voice, because I really think that Pilate probably looked at Jesus and sort of waved his hands in his direction and said, what is truth? You see, he shrugged at the very idea of truth. Power he understood. Politics he was familiar with. But truth, that sounds like a philosophical game. In our culture today, I think often sounds just like Pilate. What is truth, really? Well, it's all about perspective. That may be true for you, but it's not true for me. Or no one can really know truth, can they? And into all of that, Jesus doesn't just claim to have truth. He makes this bold, outrageous, some would say crazy kind of statement. He says, I'm the way and the truth and the life. No one, I think that covers everybody, no one comes to the Father except through me. Not I have the best argument. Not I represent one truth among many. Jesus says, I am the truth. And truth in Christianity is not an idea to master. Truth is a person to know. You probably have figured out by now that we talk a lot about Jesus at SNU. Never will apologize for that. I confess to you that I love talking about Jesus. I love hearing other people talk about Jesus. I love reading about Jesus. If you know anything about Jesus, if you spend any time at all thinking about Jesus or reading Scripture, you know that Jesus liked to tell stories. Here's the crazy thing. He told the stories 2,000 years ago. The stories are still being told today. The Bible is still the number one bestseller every single day, every single year in the world. 2,000 years later, in chapels like this and church services, we're reading the stories of Jesus. And Jesus loved to paint word pictures and tell stories when he spoke. And one of my favorite is the story that I want us to look at this morning for just a moment or two. The story comes out of the Sermon on the Mount. If you don't know anything about the Sermon on the Mount, I will tell you that it's found in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. 3 chapters in the New Testament, very first book of the Bible, the New Testament. Why is it called the Sermon on the Mount? It's called the Sermon on the Mount because Jesus went up on a mountain and sat down and began to teach those that were following him. And so for 3 chapters, they weren't chapters in those days, but for 3 chapters in our Gospel of Matthew, we see and hear all of this that Jesus has to say. He gives us instructions about how to be happy. He talks to us about how we can make a difference in other people's lives. He tells us things that we should do and things that we shouldn't do. He talks to us about how to pray, and he tells us where our focus should be. And he uses these wonderful metaphors, these pictures of salt and light and lilies and lamps and moths and money and birds and barns and pearls and pigs and snakes and fish and planks and gates and wolves and sheep, all in these 3 chapters of Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And then, at the very end, he says, I'm going to close all of this sermon off with one last story. Here's the story. Many of you have heard it before. But think about where it comes at the end. He says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the wind blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. One person builds a house on the rock. One person builds their house on the sand. Rain comes down on both of those houses. One house stands. Jesus says it's the house that was built upon the rock, the house that was built upon those that didn't just hear the words that he had to speak, but they practiced those words. You know, the story is a metaphor, but it's a metaphor that we can understand. Carolyn and I have friends that for many years owned a beach house on Bolivar Peninsula. Some of you from Texas may know where Bolivar Peninsula is, but it's just off the coast of Texas. Most people go to Galveston and they take a ferry across Galveston Bay, and that's where you get to Bolivar Peninsula. We did it often. We spent a lot of weekends, our family did, at this beach house. We didn't own it. They owned it, but they were kind enough to invite us, kind enough to share it with us, and just fantastic memories there. All of that ended when Hurricane Ike struck the Texas coast with 17-foot waves. Our friend's beach house, any idea where it is? Well, the truth is we don't know either. It's somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico, because it was completely wiped out, completely destroyed. There was literally nothing left of that. Well, you know, metaphors break down at some point. If you're building a beach house, in most cases, rock is not an option. You don't have the ability to build a beach house on rock. A number of years ago, I was a police officer. I was working the night shift in Houston. We left the station one night. We were outbound on Memorial Drive, and all I could see on the other side of Memorial Drive were concrete trucks or cement trucks. And I mean not 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. I mean 10 and then 20 and then 30 and then 40. Well, I got kind of curious about where in the world are these guys all going? And so we turned around. We were in a police car. We could go anywhere we wanted to, right? And so we went into downtown, and there in downtown was this huge hole in the ground. And they were backing up to it and pouring truckload after truckload after truckload of concrete. Why? They were building a skyscraper. And you can't build a skyscraper without a lot of concrete. Well, this morning we're not talking about building beach houses or skyscrapers. We're talking about building a life. And rock is an option for each of us. So here's the truth. You're building your life right now. Every single person listening to this message, you are building a life right now. You're not building somebody else's life. Your life has an influence on somebody else's, but you're building your own life. And how are you building it? Well, you're building it class by class, choice by choice, click by click, relationship by relationship. And you can build on sand. You can build on the sand of success, beauty, reputation, wealth, romantic love, political identity. All of those things you can build your life on. All of those, I would suggest to you this morning, are building your life on sand. Or you can build on the rock. A crucified and risen Savior who said, I'm the truth. Follow me. I'm with you always. Let me add quickly that it's not easy because there are 3 competing visions of truth you're swimming in right now. Vision 1 is this: truth is whatever works for me. This is the cultural air that we are breathing in 2026. As long as it makes you happy, that can be your truth. Follow your heart. That's your truth. Live your truth. In this view, truth is basically personal preferences that are spiritualized. So the ultimate authority becomes my feelings, my desires, my sense of what will maximize my happiness and minimize my pain. Many of you have in your phone, have in your hand an iPhone. It's not a me phone, it's not a you phone, it's not a we phone, it's an iPhone. Some of you have iPads and iMacs. They're made by a company called Apple. You ever looked at the logo for Apple? You know, the logo for Apple is a what? It's an apple. What's missing in that apple? There's a bite out of the apple. I think it goes all the way back, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's representative of what happened in the garden. All the way back in Genesis, Adam and Eve, what did they decide to do? They decided that they were going to take a bite out of the forbidden fruit. It was going to be about them. They were going to build their life on what they wanted, what they needed, or at least what they thought they needed at the time. I mentioned a very long time ago I was a police officer before I was a pastor, and And I didn't write a lot of speeding tickets. My wife wrote lots of speeding tickets. You can talk to her if you want to know more about this. But I don't know how to work the radar units or anything like that, but she did. But I want you to imagine with me this morning, what would it be like if you were out on Interstate 35 and you got stopped by an Oklahoma State trooper? And the speed limit was 75 miles an hour, but you were doing 100 miles per hour. And the trooper begins to talk to you, and you've got some options in terms of excuses. Like you could say, I don't know, sir or ma'am, I just wasn't feeling 75 miles an hour today. It felt like a 100 mile an hour day. I'm wondering how that would work out for you. Maybe you could say, I know the speed limit is only 75, but my friends in the car with me told me that I really should do 100 miles an hour. And so I was just doing what my friends wanted. I apologize, but, I was just trying to keep them happy. Maybe this, if I wasn't supposed to drive 100 miles an hour, then the car manufacturer should not have made my car to be able to go 100 miles an hour. It should only be able to go 70 miles. Yeah, right. Try that out with an Oklahoma State trooper. Let's see how that goes. Here's my favorite. Well, maybe, no, this isn't my favorite. This is another option. Everybody else was doing 100 miles an hour. I was just trying to keep up with traffic. Here's my favorite. 75 miles an hour just wasn't working for me today. You see, if truth is just what works for me, then relationships become disposable when they stop working. Moral boundaries become negotiable if they interfere with my desires. Even God becomes a customizable brand designed to affirm me, but never confront me in my sin. And in the end, that doesn't set me free, and it won't set you free. It'll leave you lonely and anxious and unanchored. And if it isn't working, whether it's your job or a relationship or school, what do? Well, we just quit. So one vision of truth out there is whatever works for me. A second vision is this: truth as whatever my peeps, my ride or dies, my homies, my gang, my tribe, or whatever you want to call your group says. So many of us don't primarily follow truth, we follow belonging. We take our cues from our social media feed, our favorite songs, our friends, our political side. And we often fail to ask, is this true? You know what we ask? Will this keep me being accepted? And this can be religious or it can be secular. You can be in a Christian bubble where no one is allowed to question anything. Or you can be in a secular bubble where no one is allowed to question the new orthodoxies of sexuality, politics, or identity. And in both cases, it's all about fear of rejection. That replaces the love of truth. Well, vision 3, and it's really the vision I would encourage you to choose, is that truth is ultimately found in Jesus Christ. That is why Southern Nazarene University exists. You see, here's the truth that we believe. There is a God who created the world and who created you. This God has spoken, and this God continues to speak. Reality is not self-invented, it is received. And at the center of reality stands the crucified and risen Jesus Christ. Truth is not what my feelings say. It's not what my tribe says. It's not what's trending. At SNU, we love scientific truth because a rational God made a rational universe. We love historical truth because God works in time and space. We love moral truth because God's character defines goodness. We love personal truth because God knows you and calls you by name. But all of these truths gather around one center, and that one center is Jesus Christ. And so as a university, we use phrases like pursuit of truth. That pursuit is holy work. And if God is truth, then every chemistry experiment is an act of respect for God's world. Every history seminar that cares about what actually happened and honors the God of history. Every philosophy class that wrestles with what the meaning is, knowingly or not, is knocking on God's door. Can I remind you today that there is one that knows you, yes, you, completely. Every thought, every fear, every contradiction, every secret. He knows the lies that we tell others. He knows the lies we tell ourselves. And yet he walked to a cross to bear our guilt, our shame, our falseness, our pretending. And on that cross, the truth himself was treated as a liar and a blasphemer so that liars and pretenders like us could be forgiven and made new. And then he rose from the grave, not as an inspiring metaphor, not as a historical figure, but as a body. God declaring that Jesus is Lord and his words are trustworthy and his offer to us is real. When you walk back to lunch or to your next class, you'll walk through an area where there'll be a prayer chapel built. Construction starts in March. But in December, while you were gone, they were out there testing the soil. Why did they test the soil? Because they want to make sure that they know what is in the soil so that they can form and design and build the proper foundation. This morning, I'd invite you to do a little soil test. Check of your heart, your soil. What are you building? What are you building on? So I want to invite you, not as your university president, but as a fellow sinner in need of grace, to bring your questions to him. Bring your sin to him. Bring your future to him. Bring your whole self to him. And trust that he is, in fact, the truth, the one solid place to stand in a world that keeps asking, what is truth? And everyone that you know, everybody that you're sitting next to, everybody that you hang out with is seeking truth. And if you've found the truth of Jesus, then you have a responsibility to help those around you who are still looking. I love the story of a couple of runners who were competing in an international race in Spain. Kenyan runner Abel Mutai was a short distance from the finish line when he became confused by the signage and he stopped. He thought the race was over. That was his truth. He was convinced that the race was over. Close behind him was a Spanish runner, Ivan Fernandez, who saw what had happened, and Fernandez began to shout at Mutai in Spanish that he needed to keep going because he hadn't finished the race. Well, Mutai didn't understand Spanish, and so what did Fernandez do? He grabbed him, physically grabbed him, and began to push him to the finish line so that Abel Mutai, the Kenyan runner, could actually win the race. People thought he was crazy. A journalist later asked Ivan Fernandez, why in the world did you do that? You could have won the race. Fernandez had a great line. He said, my dream is that someday we can live in a community where we push and help each other to win. Can I tell you that my dream is that SNU will be a community that's always gently pushing and helping other people find the truth of Jesus Christ. Would you stand with me for just a moment? I've got some friends, and you've got some friends that are scattered around the room, and they're going to spread out around the room. Some of them are going to come right down here in the front, and we're going to close with prayer today. But we're going to close with prayer specifically for you if you want to be prayed over. We've done this before. We did it in the fall. If you're new, this will be the first time for you. But come on, Dr. Fitzgerald, Dr. Earl, don't be shy. Come on, spread out along the sides, along the front. This is free. How good is it to be prayed over by somebody who believes in you, who loves you, who cares about you? If you've got a specific prayer request, you can actually share that prayer request with them, and they'll pray for that. But if you just want to be prayed for, you just want a blessing prayed over your life, you don't have to know the person. If you do know the person, they're one of your professors or coaches or student success or wherever they may be, that's awesome. But for the next few minutes, that's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to close the service. Blair will come and give us some benediction in a few minutes. But find one of these people. I'm going to come right down here too because I'd love to pray over some of you and give them the opportunity to say a prayer over you as we close out this service.